Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of my experimental new video series where I talk about a bit about myself, my life. Sunday was not fun day as we last left off, and Monday was thankfully much better. Knee was still acting up the prior day, yet we had enough help where check stands weren't really much of a factor. Of course, things were still somewhat behind when I got in, but otherwise weren't too bad, But a lot of this is because Monday is just a day where things are just busy. Milk load comes in between 5 and 6. This weekly cleaning's got to be done before 8. Milk inventory does got to be done before 9. While I, as the midshifter, didn't have to do any of that, the opener did, and which is why I have to help the opener catch up. Now, this is likely why when I'm scheduled on Mondays, I tend to be scheduled the earlier 9 to 6 shift rather than the later 11 to 8, as I often am on those other days. Now, the load got in when I was on lunch, and since Monday loads tend to be large, as in my other load, partially because it's when most of our weekly ad items come in, usually leave the items on pallets for the next day. Of course, I rarely work on Tuesdays, so usually I don't have to, do that. So it's H&R that tend to handle that. I was off on Tuesday, of course, like I said, which I used as a rest day, though I used some of that time to do a bit of work on the last episode, which I posted just the other day. And, of course, do some laundry and play Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I was also off Wednesday, and of course that was more of an errand day, mostly shopping and stuff. My Eldritch deck is strong, but I'll probably do some tweaks when I have a chance. Um, though I also like to create an Albaz deck to have a chance against the meta tier decks, and maybe a Sword Soul deck. Love the versatility of that archetype. Reminds me of the heroes at the height of their competitive power. Now maybe I'll do some gameplay video when I figure out how to do that, just every now and then, maybe as I have time and feel like it. But Thursday was slow business-wise. Load came in earlier than expected, not long after I clocked in, and was small. I was already done with most of it before I even went to lunch. Toward the end of my shift, I filled ice cream, which I usually do on Fridays and Sundays to stave off boredom. But again, boredom kicked in, so I pretty much did it. But I'll take a boring day over a stressful one, and Friday was certainly the dullest shift. Uh, anyway, I was off Saturday and spent the earlier morning hours debating whether or not to visit a friend. Reason being is that this friend lives close enough to where I meet his house at relatively promptly, 30 minutes to 45. But, it requires me to get on the freeway. Now, it's not a problem normally. Fairly confident in my driving abilities, but I was concerned about traffic because of the local Christmas parade. And thankfully, the parade route was not very intrusive, so we didn't really get I didn't really get stuck in any major traffic, and my friend's name is Justin, and he lives with his mother, and he lives with a roommate named Troy, who's actually closer in age to his mother than to us. Now, I often see Troy and speak to him when I visit, and he felt a bit chatty that day, as he sometimes does. He often asks me about work, how things are going. First hour or so of my visit was largely about that, though I also spoke to him about my goal of becoming a notary public. Took a class, passed an exam last July, then I got a letter a few months ago saying I didn't have a valid business address because I thought business address meant my employer's address. But then the examiner said it was my mailing address, and well, my only mailing address is my home address, so I put that, but that still apparently wasn't good enough for them. So I get a letter in the mail saying, hey, we still need a valid business address. And, I thought, because I thought I would put self because that's what it said on the directions for my particular case, even though I have no idea if I'm going to work for myself or I'm going to be hired by someone else. I haven't figured that part out yet. Now, one part I brought up about my notary plan is me considering specializing in special needs notarizations. And for those of you who are familiar with this channel, this is largely autism advocacy. And this probably doesn't surprise any of you. Now, for those of you who don't know what a notary is, they act as third-party witnesses on the signing of various legal documents, such as loan documents, vehicle transfers, power of attorney, and can also administer some legal oaths and affirmations. So it is a fairly important job. So once that was done, I watched the new Scott Pilgrim series with Justin on Netflix. Wasn't what either of us expected. Much of the reason why there are so many people that hate this particular series is because they feel like they got bait and switched. Why they felt this way, well, giving away too many spoilers for those of you who might be interested in seeing it, yet haven't done so, takes place in an alternate timeline that's very different from the live-action movie released in 2010 and the comic book series it was based on. It's decent for what it is, but I think they should have been a bit more honest about it in their advertising. Because if you expect it to be the same as the source material, you're going to be very disappointed. Even so, hey, if you're a fan of the series, I still think you should check it out. Anyway, it does have the same characters, but events play out very differently. Again, just give it a chance if you want, but again, don't expect it to be exactly like the comics or that movie. Now, we also saw episodes 2 through 4 of season 2 of Invincible. That's a superhero show based on a comic book series that ran from 2003 to 2018, heavily inspired by Marvel and DC Comics, with it taking most of its inspiration from Superman, of course, but it also, without spoiling too much, inverts many of the tropes common to Superman comics and nearly puts them in darker directions. Now, one of the most important alien races in the series takes a lot of inspiration from the Kryptonians in particular, and I kind of think may also take some inspiration from the Saiyans from DBZ, considering, well, those of you familiar with that, you'll understand what I'm talking about when you watch the series. Anyway, like that Sunday, like the prior one, was the most difficult day of the week, but it wasn't really quite as hellish. Now, I did Frozen. Me doing Frozen on Sunday is not unusual because my department's usually ahead, but Frozen often falls behind. They were a bit more behind than usual because Frozen person JN had to leave work early due to being sick. So M, who's service manager, which is the third highest ranked manager in the store, did ice cream while I did as much as I could of the rest of it. Another of the managers said to pretend dairy didn't exist that day, and she would face it just shortly after I filled the milk right before I was about to go to lunch. Now, I knew even if pigs flew out of hell while I was freezing over, I wouldn't finish everything, but I was able to knock out a couple pallets worth of product. And also finish up ice cream after I got back from lunch because Em had to go home because she was the opening manager that day. And she usually tends to be because store manager's usually off that day. Now, it was a shorter day, like Friday, and this is oftentimes, after a major holiday, management will cut down hours, in part due to business going down afterwards. I'm a bit surprised they didn't have me stay. Of course, to be completely honest, I'm usually not all that eager to do so. Even so, I was off for the next 3 days, so it really wouldn't have been all that bad anyway. So, of course, my hours for the week after are going to be a bit higher, so well, you'll hear about those in a moment. So, until then, stay tuned.